Without any further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is also our guest of honor for the symposium today, Michael A. Cremo, Honorary Doctorate from Bhaktivedanta College in Budapest, Hungary. So I'd like to give you a short introduction of him before he comes up the stage and speaks. So Michael Cremo is an American freelance researcher. He's a member of World Archaeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists. He has authored several books and papers on anthropology, cosmology, and Vedic culture. Among them, the highly appreciated and noteworthy are Forbidden Archaeology, The Hidden History of Human Race, The Archaeological Record, and many more. Michael Cremo has honorary PhD in Science and Theology. He is a research associate of the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies and is a member of the executive committee of the Museum of the Vedic Planetarium. His work focuses on Vedic perspective, on human origins and antiquity, as well as Vedic cosmology. He has presented papers at meetings of the World Archaeological Congress, European Association of Archaeologists, the International Congress for History of Science, and the International Union of Prehistoric and Protohistoric Sciences. He has also presented papers in the biannual conference series Towards the Science of Consciousness. He has given invited lectures at the Royal Institution in London, the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, the Indian Institute of Sciences in Bangalore, and other scientific institutions. He has also lectured in universities around the world. His books, Forbidden Archaeology and Human Devolution, have been widely reviewed in scientific and academic journals. The abridged popular edition of Forbidden Archaeology, titled The Hidden History of the Human Race, has been translated into over 20 languages. Cremo's latest book is My Science, My Religion, a collection of 24 of the papers he has presented as major international science congresses. Cremo is particularly interested in examining the history of the archaeology and anthropology from the standpoint of alternative worldviews, particularly worldviews with foundation in consciousness-based ancient Indian thought. He has been a member of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness since 1974. So with a short introduction, I would like to invite our guest of honor, Michael Cremo, to the stage to address the audience and present his talk today, which is titled Museum of the Vedic Planetarium, presenting the Gaudiya Vaishnava cosmology as cultural heritage that fosters world peace.
I'd like to thank the organizers, my fellow speakers who will be presenting today, and all of you who have come to hear something about how the synthesis of science, spirituality, culture, and art can contribute to world peace. I think there's an urgent necessity for science and religion to make peace with each other. That is the key to world peace. In 1945, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This technology was produced by scientists, atomic scientists. And many of them were very disappointed. You know, they had invented this technology, but then the question came, should it be built? If it was built, should it be used? And if it was used, how should it be used? So they were very disappointed in the result. Therefore, in 1945, Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer and other atomic scientists founded the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. In 1947, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists introduced what they called the Doomsday Clock. They set it at 20 minutes to midnight, midnight being nuclear catastrophe. This year, in 2023, they set the doomsday clock to 90 seconds to midnight. According to this is the closest the world has come to nuclear war since the last time such weapons were used. I've been around a long time. I can remember the Berlin crisis of the 1960s, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and many others. And it seemed at many times in this history, the world was close to nuclear war. But apparently, we are now closer than ever to such a catastrophe. And this suggests the need of scientists and technologists to take some help from spirituality so they can control what they are working on and what uses it'll be put to. Einstein himself said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." My guru, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, said, "Religion without philosophical basis, without scientific basis, is sentiment. That religion based on philosophy and science, that is right." So there is a need for the scholars in these disciplines, the scientists and spiritualists, to come to some understanding so that their significant influence can be used to keep the world in a state of peace. Of course, when we speak about science and religion, we have to realize that it's not easy to speak about them in just general terms. As these historians of science, John Hedley Brooke and Jeffrey Cantor wrote, the perceived relation between science and religion depends on how both of these terms are defined, when and by whom. They further pointed out, we must ask, whose science, whose religion? Because there are many different kinds of religion, some of them more helpful for a synthesis of science and spirituality, and some not. There are also many types of science and scientists, some more favorable to synthesis of science and spirituality, and some not. So we must ask, whose science, whose religion? That's why I titled my latest book, My Science, My Religion. And as was mentioned in the introduction, that's a collection of 24 papers I presented at mainstream scientific conferences integrating my spirituality and science. So by my science, and hopefully our science, I mean scientific evidence and logic consistent with the Vedic conclusions. By my religion, I mean the Vedic conclusions as I have received them from my guru, Srila Prabhupada. Now, the main science that I personally deal with is archeology. And within archeology, I find two groups. One I call the archeology group, and the other I call the archeologies group. The archeology singular group believes there's one objective, empirical, professional archeology united in presenting its findings to the world. The archeologies group understands that there may be many different kinds of archaeology. The modern Western scientific type of archaeology, which was used to suppress the identities and worldviews of people in various parts of the world during the colonial period in Asia, Africa, the Americas. That's one archaeology, but there may be other archaeologies, a Native American Indian archaeology, a Pacific Islander archaeology, a Vedic archaeology. As a matter of fact, the World Archaeological Congress is one of the world's largest international organizations. And its journal is called Archaeologies. And they express an interest in diversity, multivocality, indigenous and post-colonial approaches to archaeology. And they welcome and stress the importance of non-Western epistemologies. So within the world of science, we have some that are more open to different perspectives, which may aid in the synthesis of science and spirituality, and others who are not. So the Vedic philosophy and Vedic outlook on cosmology that I favor is very conducive to world peace because it explains we are ultimately all beings of pure consciousness. I'm a being of pure consciousness. You're a being of pure consciousness. We're all beings of pure consciousness. There's no need to divide ourselves up into competing, warring groups based on things like nationality, race, even religion. This worldview is very conducive to fostering world peace. And not just peace among human beings, because there's also a war against other species. We have huge slaughterhouses and things like that, animals, plants, species being destroyed. So the Vedic cosmology wants to see peace, not just among the human species, but among all forms of life. And the ultimate type of peace is the peace of each individual finding his higher or her higher self, which exists and can express itself on a higher platform of reality beyond birth and death. Because even if, got lost. Okay, hit the wrong button somewhere. Because even if we establish peace between the nations of the world, among the humans on this planet, and even among all species, still we're confronted with another type of disturbance. And that is something that the Vedic philosophy and cosmology offers an answer to. So that concludes my welcoming remarks. And according to the schedule, I go on to my talk, which is the first one on the list today. There'll be several others coming. This is about a project that I'm involved in. It's called the Museum of the Vedic Planetarium. And it represents cosmology as cultural heritage that fosters world peace. I noticed in our program materials that it stressed science, spirituality, art, and culture. So this Museum of the Vedic Planetarium it involves all of those things, brings science, spirituality, culture, art, all together to foster world peace. The Museum of the Vedic Planetarium is part of a larger project called the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. The museum section of this project is circled there in red. It's 5 floors, which are going to be dedicated to exhibits showing Vedic perspectives on science, cosmology, astrophysics, biology, consciousness studies. As was mentioned in the introduction, the Vedic worldview is a consciousness-based worldview. And we're going to be hearing more about that later in the day. Now, when we speak about heritage, we generally mean things from the past that become our heritage now, but we also have to think about the future. What are we going to pass on to future generations? Are we going to pass on a world full of danger of war, environmental destruction? Are we going to pass on knowledge and principles and insights that foster peace among people in the world and a more healthy regard for the environment? So the specific worldview or culture that's being presented in this project is Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And a major figure in that school of thought was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in 1486 in Mayapur in West Bengal. And he stressed the study of a work, a Sanskrit work called the Srimad Bhagavatam, also known as the Bhagavat Purana. And this begins with, the Bhagavat Purana begins with sages gathered together in the forest of Naimisharanya in northern India about 5,000 years ago. And these sages are able to perceive the onset of the coming age. They can see in the future how conditions are going to deteriorate. And they're thinking, what from our vast heritage of knowledge do we need to communicate to the future generations that will help them not only survive, but make a success of things in this difficult age that we're in. So in the museum, when people first enter, they will have an experience of this. They'll enter a forest and see the sages contemplating these questions. Of course, these sages emphasize cosmology. We have to have a picture of the larger world that we exist in. So we need to answer questions like, who am I in this cosmos? Where am I in the cosmos? Where should I be going? Now, on this question, who am I? today, many scientists will say we're machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. Oh, did something go wrong? Okay. Yes. Okay. I guess I should look at the screen every once in a while. Thank you. So, on this question, who am I? Many scientists today will say we're machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. Richard Dawkins said, "We are survival machines, robot vehicles, blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." Now, if people have that sense of identity, which many do because this is what's being promoted by the scientific community through the education systems all over the world, they're going to have a certain type of culture, and we'll get to that. What about consciousness, some people would say? Most scientists believe it's produced by chemicals interacting in the brain, but they've never shown exactly how chemicals can produce consciousness. And as far as where we are, they would say we're in an accidental universe, a universe that expanded out of some random fluctuations of the quantum mechanical vacuum. There's no purpose to it. It's just an accident. We're accidental beings in an accidental cosmos. And how did we come about? Well, it just happened somehow or other. So if we define our identity in this materialistic way, then naturally our goals and values and objectives in life will tend to be extremely materialistic. And we'll think that to produce and consume more and more material things is the main purpose of human life. And in that process of ever-increasing material production and consumption, we're finding that conflict on all levels of human society is increasing in the world, including the danger of nuclear war, which I mentioned in the very beginning, we're closer to than at any point in the world's history up to now. So we have this conflict on all levels of human society. But in the Vedic cosmology, as we're presenting it in this museum of the Vedic Planetarium, we are suggesting there's another identity, Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. I am not just a random collection of chemicals. And my consciousness isn't going to disappear at the time of death when the chemicals in the brain stop interacting. No, we're eternal, conscious, personal, individual beings. And this is not just something that people have to accept on faith. It's something we can all experience. We're conscious. It's the most real fact of our existence. But there's also scientific evidence that supports this concept that the conscious self, the Atma, can exist apart from the body, apart from the brain. One field of investigation that's very interesting is the study of out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, as they're called. During these experiences, what appears to happen is that the conscious self temporarily separates from the body, from the brain, and then re-enters the same body. But that leads to another idea, namely that a conscious self can go from one body to another. Of course, that's reincarnation. And there are scientists who are investigating that, studying past life memories reported in many cases by young children. Now, this process of reincarnation can be progressive. In one lifetime, one may make progress from one type of body to another. So there's a kind of evolution that goes on, an evolution of consciousness, an evolution of the spirit, soul, as it goes from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So this kind of answers the question for us, who are we? We're not just collections of chemicals. We are Atma, Brahman, spirit souls, eternal. And in terms of where are we, well, we're somewhere in the cosmos. By cosmos, I mean everything that exists. There is, according to the Vedic cosmology, a whole spiritual aspect to the cosmos. And that's where each conscious self really belongs, because it's there on that level of pure consciousness that consciousness can fully express its Satchidananda nature, its nature of eternality, full knowledge, and full satisfaction and pleasure. That cannot be experienced on this level of reality, where consciousness is limited in so many different ways. But that material part of the cosmos, where consciousness is subjected to so many limitations, is only a small part of the total reality. And you could say it's like a little virtual reality system. And it's here that, see, the ruling principle at that level of pure consciousness is loving, cooperative harmony among all conscious beings and the source of all conscious beings. So, if conscious selves aren't in that harmonious, cooperative mood of loving, caring, if they have developed any amount of selfishness and greed and the desire to control and dominate and exploit others, well, that's the virtual reality system we're in now. But it has a dual purpose. You can either become more and more entangled in the process of trying to dominate, control, and exploit the resources of material nature and other people, other living entities. That's one path one can take. The other path is to understand we're all beings of pure consciousness. We should satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, fair, and efficient way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing the resource of consciousness and transferring ourselves from that limited virtual reality system that we're now inhabiting and go to the real platform of existence where we can express the full potentialities of consciousness. So this worldview of understanding, we're all beings of pure consciousness, we're all related to each other, it fosters an attitude of ahimsa, because if we understand that in the body of the animal, in the body of the human being, in the body of the plant, there's a conscious self, just like our own conscious self, then we tend to be non-violent. We don't commit violence upon those living entities. So if we really understood that all the people of the world, all living things, are related to each other, part of the same spiritual family, we wouldn't divide ourselves up into nation states that arm themselves to the teeth with nuclear weapons. And there are many who have already done it, and probably there are going to be many more who do it. And unless attitudes change, it's hard to see that these things won't be used someday. So this Vedic Gaudiya Vaishnava worldview was for some time confined basically to India, to groups there, and maybe a few scholars around the world knew a little bit about these things. But starting in 1965, this worldview, this Vedic cosmology, was globalized internationally by my guru, A.C. Bhaktiedanta Swami Prabhupada. And part of his program for globalizing, internationalizing this worldview and turning it from some antiquary topic into a living, breathing worldview that has direct relevance to the issues that we're confronting today. Part of his program for that was the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, which is now under construction. It's almost completed in India. He said, within the planetarium, we will construct a huge detailed model of the universe as described in the text of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Within the planetarium, the model will be studied by onlookers from different levels by the use of escalators. Detailed information will be given on open verandas at the different levels by means of dioramas, charts, films, etc. So he had this vision in 1976. And this is a real photograph. It's not CGI. The structure of it is now up. And as I said, I'm involved in the museum part of it. And we're in the process of developing the exhibits to make these points that I've been making here in maybe perhaps a more effective way at this place. And of course, we're also going to have a digital version of the museum so that people who aren't able to make their way to Mayapur in West Bengal to visit the actual physical structure of the museum will be able to access it and the cosmology connected with it from anywhere in the world. Uh, we're going to put a lot of emphasis on the non-sectarian nature of the Vedas. Veda is a Sanskrit word. It simply means knowledge. And knowledge is available to everyone. So we want to stress in this museum that we're talking about something that is relevant to everyone. And we want to have exhibits that make the point that we're all beings of pure consciousness, different from the bodily vehicle made of the gross material elements that we may happen to be occupying at the present moment, that there's something beyond that. And we also want to give people the experience of existing in different bodies, maybe the body of a bird. We're going to be making use of the best ideas, the best technologies, the best art ideas from artists. As I was saying in the beginning, this project is a perfect example of what this conference is about, integrating science, spirituality, art, and culture for the benefit of the world, and especially the cause of world peace. And of course, for me, cosmology is a broad term. One thing it includes is, yes, the movement of the planets, the origin of galaxies, and things like that. But for me, cosmology includes everything that's present in the cosmos, and that includes us. We're all part of the cosmos. So, but we will have exhibits and displays related to astronomical phenomenon and things like that. And finally, I'd like to say that the project is based on a non-sectarian approach. We may be approaching things from a Vedic perspective, but we don't make any exclusive claim for truth. Say only we have the truth. We recognize there are lots of spiritual traditions in the world, and many of them are conducive to world peace and the synthesis of science and religion. And it's just like the spiritual techniques that we're talking about are broad. And just like you can, if you're a geologist, you can extract gold from its ore. And when you've, if somebody could bring a glass of water, I'd appreciate it. But just like a geologist will know how to extract gold from its ore, and then once you have the gold, you could form it into coins. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Once you have the gold, you could form it into coins, and then you could stamp the symbols of different nations on it. But if it's really gold, doesn't matter what symbol you've stamped on it. So it's like with spirituality. If you've got it, doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it Hinduism, you could call it Islam, you could call it Buddhist, you could put your label on it. But if it's really spirituality, it'll shine forth, it'll have its own value. You'll know it. So that brings me to the end of my talk. I'd like to thank you for your kind attention and giving me the opportunity to present this today, to say a few words about the synthesis of science, spirituality, culture, and art for the purpose of world peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so now we'd like to take some questions from the audience. So please, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and then you can ask questions. Yeah. So while you formulate your question, maybe I can start. You talk about evolution of consciousness. So I was wondering, is this evolution of consciousness unidirectional or is it bidirectional? Because in case of human beings, as far as I know, I think it's bidirectional, but in other living beings, it's maybe unidirectional. So if you can clarify on this.
I would agree with how you formulate it, that in the human species, it's bidirectional, whereas in other species, it's unidirectional. And that's because of all the different bodily vehicles it's possible to have, the human vehicle has a special purpose. And it is in the human vehicle or human form of life that the conscious self can make decisions about how to take advantage of the two paths that are available to it, becoming more and more entangled in the material energy or awakening one's own spiritual nature. Now the problem is that some humans misuse their vehicle. Now, many of us drive vehicles, automobiles, for example. And to drive an automobile, you require a license. And to keep your license, you have to obey the traffic rules. If you are DUI, as we say in America, driving under the influence of some intoxicant, or you operate your vehicle in a dangerous way that puts others into danger, then you may lose your license. And that means you won't be able to operate the vehicle that you paid for. So it's the same with human life, the human vehicle. If you misuse it, you may lose your license for it, which means you take another type of vehicle, which may be animal, plant, insect. But when that happens, there's an automatic progression until you come back to the human form. And again, okay, you've got your license back. Do a better job this time. And if you do that, then your progress is always forward. Even if you don't complete the task of entering that realm of pure consciousness, even if you make 5 or 10%, then your next life, you pick up where you left off until hopefully you achieve the goal.
Thank you. More questions? Yes.
Sir, my name is Dhananjay. My name is Dhananjay. So with your vast experience, archaeological experience, are there any incidents which made you to a deep dive into spirituality? Would you mind to share one or two such incidents?
Okay, incidents that have inspired me to take to spirituality. Yes. Well, I think that goes beyond archaeology and more to a general approach to life. And I had questions, from the time I was very young, even as an infant, a child, 2 years old, I was always interested in the truth. I wanted to know what was real. Because even as a child, sometimes you see something that appears to be true. Maybe your parents or an uncle or a friend, tries to play some little trick on you. You want to know what the truth is. And I found, as I was growing up, from the religious background I was in, the academic background, the social background, the national background, there were always questions that weren't answered. And sometimes, somehow or other, maybe because of some progress I made in some past life, I got a copy of Bhagavad Gita as it is. And as I read through that book, I found questions that nobody had been able to answer for me were answered. And then I visited a community of followers of the Bhagavad Gita, disciples of my guru. And I saw these people are actually living the teachings of the Gita, the book that they study. In my days as a student at the university, my friends and I would often discuss different philosophical ideas, but nobody ever dreamed of living by them. It was just some intellectual thing. But when I saw that it's actually possible to live the truths that I'm reading about and intellectualizing about, that was very important because I understood it was an option. It wasn't an option that I chose to follow right away, but eventually I decided of all the options available to me, that's the best. Now, the community and my guru were teaching something called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means the yoga of devotion. And one of the principles of it is to use your talent and ability for a higher purpose, to elevate yourself and to elevate the consciousness of others. So I had some talent and ability to write, to speak, to research. I could have used it for anything. I could have been working in some government agency but I wanted something that was really international, truly international, free from limiting boundaries. So I found that, something where I can take whatever talent or ability that I have and not use it for any selfish purpose, either individually or collectively, but hopefully for my benefit and the benefit of others. So, in closing, it's kind of traditional in settings like this to end with a call for peace. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's give a big round of applause to Michael Cremo.